Welcome back to the VIP Collective. Now, typically I would say I am your host, Corinne McDonald. However, for the month of May, as we announced last week, we are handing the podcast over to the team at Muse Event Co. Luxury wedding planners Laura Atendido and Ellie Martires are walking us through some of their tips and tricks when it comes to wedding planning. On today's episode, they are taking a deep dive into some of their past events, some of the challenges, some of the logistics, and really sharing how important it is to infuse your own style in your own wedding. As always, I want to thank you guys for watching. If you like this episode, please feel free to hit like and subscribe, and you can tap that bell. Now, if you're ready, let's go.
Hello, everybody. Happy Wednesday. Welcome back to the VIP Takeover with myself, Laura Atendido, and Ellie Martires of the newly rebranded Muse Event Co out of Toronto, Canada. We are here today to talk to you about a topic that's been around forever, which is how to infuse your own sense of kind of identity and style into weddings and wedding planning, but has definitely picked up its relevance, I'm going to say, in 2020 with COVID and the pandemic, because we have pivoted. Hate that word. I know you do too, but it's the right word to use at the right time. We've all pivoted to these smaller gatherings, and they've also lent us, the opportunity to customize and personalize even more than we were usually able to do with kind of larger groupings and gatherings. So today we're going to talk always of bringing personality into your event, how to really create an identity to your event, your wedding. And it will touch, of course, all of the intimate experiences that we've had with smaller gatherings, but it's also going to deal with the larger gatherings too, and, how to make those feel as intimate as, they possibly can. With intimacy really being putting your own personal touch on the event itself and making people feel when they're there, even if they're not directly engaged in a conversation with you as the bride or the groom, that they see your personality and your personal taste kind of infused into the evening that you've kind of created for them to celebrate in. So, Ellie, thank you so much for joining us. Do we need to go into a little bit of an intro?
I mean, we can. Here we are as the newly branded Muse Event Co. We're the same girls that you know and love, just with a fresh name, a fresh look, and a fresh vibe. Thanks, Laura. I think today we're going to talk a little bit also about design challenges and some of our bigger scale events that we have worked on. We're not just going to talk about the intimate smaller gatherings. We're also going to talk about the big gatherings and how we have endured some challenges on some of those events. I think every event, regardless of the size and scale, has challenges, but we want to focus on those big design elements that you see all over our Instagram, on our website, and basically talk a little bit about how we get to that point. So, Laura, why don't you start us off? Let's start big. We'll work our way down to small. So tell me a little bit about one of the most challenging events that you have worked on and that you have planned.
I think a lot of our challenging ones have been two scenarios when I think about, and challenging just meaning that there's a lot that has to run perfectly seamlessly, not only in your execution and your planning and setup, but also sometimes trusting the weather gods as well to work in your favor. So one of our, most challenging ones was probably a recent wedding we had at the Four Seasons Hotel, Jessica and Michael's wedding. And it wasn't challenging in the sense that it was impossible or we were kind of like salmon swimming upstream. It was challenging in a sense that we were going to be doing a complete takeover of the Four Seasons Hotel in Toronto, a complete redesign from laying fresh carpet, dance floor flooring, room liners, draping, trussing, ceiling install, truss covers, lighting, floral installations, custom installed, 16-foot trees, room to room, wall to wall furniture deliveries. So it was just challenging in the sense that there were just so many different components to think of, and you have to you have to really know your craft well, I think, to be able to step back and see the project management piece of just understanding that, even a truss is not going to be a truss that comes in, gets installed, and the truss team leaves. Your truss team is going to come in, they're going to install your truss, they're going to keep it at lower level of working height, so your floral and decor team can come in. They can do all of their beautiful work from ground level, which is so much less labor intensive than servicing a truss that's been already airlifted up to its final height. Then you've got to bring, your truss team back in once the, beautiful floral ceiling install is complete, raise it up. Then you've got to bring in your cladding team to clad and cover the truss. So, if the industrial look isn't what's going for your wedding vibe, it's covered. The lighting team to come in and then test and get all the lighting in the right places to kind of illuminate that. So I think for me, challenges usually come in with big installs is timing, is making sure that the client is being sold on a vision that realistically we have enough time to execute. And so that's even from a design process, some of the conversations we have really early on with our clients. And we find a lot of the really good floral designers, they know that too. So when they're sitting in a consult and the designs are starting to get big and we're dreaming and we're excited and it's like, this could be epic, ourselves, a good floral designer will always come back to, well, when do we have access? Because, you can staff your team as big as physically possible, but the reality is it takes so much time to do certain things. Laying a full room of carpet is going to take, no matter what, on average, at least 4 hours of install once you just get the carpet actually physically up to the room, and you need to work from one end to the other because you want your seams to line up perfectly. So I think a challenge to me in weddings is ensuring that we have realistic access for setup. That's really the first one, because I find it sometimes hard for couples to understand that if we physically don't have the time, and if they've booked a certain event space and that's booked the day before with another wedding, and the earliest we can get in is 2 a.m. the day of the wedding, there's only going to be so much we're going to be able to do unless that space on the Friday is open and they're willing to commission a room rental for setup, on the client's expense, to give us the time we need to literally do a massive transformation.
Absolutely.
So I think setup timing has been one of the biggest challenges for us, for sure.
And
what about you?
I love that. I'm just going to touch on the point of that conversation coming early on in the design process. And like you said, good designers and planners like ourselves, we have to be so fully aware of how much time do we have to execute this design that we're dreaming of. Because if you don't have access the day before, if you only have access a couple hours before, then we have to revisit the design plan. And so before we start to conceptualize these big grand ideas, let's figure out how much time we have to be able to actually execute them. So I think that's first and foremost where we start in the design process. And before we even present anything to a client, is knowing the timing and the logistics around being able to execute. And I think a lot of people don't realize when they see our Instagram, they see our work, the logistics that go behind even a white carpet alone, carpeting the Four Seasons completely in white carpet, the booties that we bring for everybody to wear on site, and everybody's walking around their blue medical booties, and to, like you said, plan the carpet out in a way where your load in is occurring on one side, but the carpet's already complete, but they're able to continue to work throughout the space. It's a lot of moving parts, and it's exciting and it's fun to think about. Like, even talking about it now, I'm like, I can't wait to get back to those big events and to be able to dream and conceptualize big. But in terms of other challenges with one of the most challenging events that I worked on actually was Patterson wedding, and they were bringing in an artist from the United States, and it was the first time that I had the opportunity to work with an incredible entertainment team from the United States that this artist was affiliated with. And the logistics alone with his team in terms of flight schedules, hotel schedules, transportation schedules was an entirely new piece that I had never had the opportunity before to dive into. And that was incredibly challenging to navigate through. And his team was incredible, and they provided me with all the tools I needed to be able to execute that and to give them what they want. But even things, I actually worked with Soul Power on this project, but things about, how he was going to cross the border, what he was allowed to, was he allowed to be working in Canada, and the documents required to bring him from the United States to Canada. And so that was a very big learning experience for me. And I know when it comes to music and entertainment, there are so many moving parts in terms of productions and AV, and it was all of that included, but on a much bigger scale. And so
right,
that was probably one of the most challenging in the past couple of years that I've had to endure. And I know that you brought in an artist once for one of your clients.
Yeah, that one was a surprise, not for the couple. They were surprising all of their guests, but that was probably also another like challenge in its micro sense, was to be able to bring in, which was a favorite country artist of my clients who are based out in Vancouver, Dallas Smith, who they loved and have kind of formed a personal relationship with. So we were bringing him in to do a concert post dinner and surprise all of the guests. But just being able to coordinate, like having a band come in and do, a sound check on a day where you literally have a wedding happening. You don't want anyone to know that there's a band stage behind that tent. Like, it's just, sometimes it's like those kind of logistics and setups. I guess another really challenging thing that we've experienced, and again, challenging too, is like, it's not meant to be, like impossible. It's just the amount of like extra steps that need to be done, and like I's and T's and I's, dots and T's is travel components, right? So while a lot of our work is done locally based in the Toronto area, a lot of the clients we service do have us greatly involved with assisting with travel for their clients who are coming up to the area. So one in particular that stands out probably is the Meaford wedding, with Rachel and Michael. They were, very gracious in wanting to host all of their guests who were traveling up to the Blue Mountain area for the wedding, but also provide not only just accommodations for their guests for the weekend, meals and full service transportation. So, I mean, that in itself is just a whole level of like travel agency coordination above and beyond the actual event itself. And so, the challenge with that, was finding ways to get people who are flying from, Billy Bishop Airport, Toronto Pearson Airport, people who are local to the city, and, offering us a way for our clients to feel like they were hosting all levels of, of the wedding weekend. So, where were all the guest shuttles in the cities going to go? What times were they going to leave at? Who needed to be on what shuttles? Because we really wanted it to be, turnkey. And, it got to the point where we had some guests that were coming up by helicopter. So I knew when things started to get to the point where I was worrying about flight plan timelines, and other helicopters arriving and sending the golf carts down to the helipad to pick up guests. And just, again, being there at 10 o'clock at night on a Thursday to get guests, checked into their hotel rooms and making sure everyone's greeted at the hotel. And, I think that's one of the strongest parts of, our team, is we're the kind of people that want to be always, forward facing and client facing. So even though we'll have a team with us helping, it's like, we want to be there at the hotel when guests arrive. We want to make sure that they all get into, their right room and get their itinerary, so they know where to go find, breakfast, lunch, and dinners, when they're not actually at the wedding. So travel components, definitely. And I would say, one takeaway I take specifically from that wedding was, we could have used a translator specifically for that wedding. And it wasn't something that was necessarily brought to our attention that would have been a necessary need, but it was definitely something that I felt, in hindsight, like it would have even been helpful too, because we were really, also playing, a hosting travel guide as well for so many guests that were coming up for the weekend. Yeah.
Has a client ever presented you something, and going back to design, have they ever presented you something, or have you ever had a moment where you felt like, how am I going to do this? How the heck am I going to make this happen?
Yes. So I would say, like, okay, so Rachel and Lauren, we came up with the idea. It could even been me putting my foot in my mouth and putting it out there. I don't know if I was serious at the time, or they came to me first idea, but a Ferris wheel at the wedding. And it was like, yeah, like, why not? Like, first things first is, let's go to the venue. We were at Kurt's Orchard, Niagara-on-the-Lake, and see, like, will they physically allow a Ferris wheel on property? But then when you start looking, it's like, you realize it becomes a lot more complicated to try to figure out how to actually rent a Ferris wheel for a weekend, And then again, it goes down to the logistics of setup is like, if we're on a Saturday, this thing can't get started setting up Saturday morning. It has to be Friday. Is there another client who's hosting their event there on Friday? They don't want a Ferris wheel setup happening.
Maybe they do.
Yeah, maybe they do. But like at the same point, it comes down again, that was kind of really around like, okay, how do we go find like a wedding look Ferris wheel? Cause you can find like, like carnival style ones, but of course I'm like dreaming of like the all white Ferris wheel. Right. So, I think that was one where I was like, can we really make this happen? The rest of the ideas, like, I feel like I'm such a yes person. So,
Yeah.
it's like, if I have to risk, like, I know I'm thinking back to Stephanie and Sean's wedding, and like, for Stephanie and Sean, they had a beautiful wedding on a private property out in the west end of the city, out in like kind of North Milton. And we had this beautiful complex of tents that were set up for it. But, it was really, really important to Stephanie, the bride, and I'll say Sean probably as well, the groom, but really important to Stephanie, which makes it really important to me, to be married in the open air. So like we wanted to build the tent floor for the ceremony, but not put the tent up until the last minute. And like weather in Toronto, it can change. If it says it's going to be sunny on Thursday, the weather might be different come, Friday. So that was again a challenge, that we probably had to deal with, was like really pushing, and I will give absolute kudos to Next Level Tents for working through this. But like, what is a plan B going to be, and how quickly can we get this tent up? And I think they wanted a final answer by Wednesday, and then I pushed it to like Thursday, 9 a.m. and then Thursday as late as I possibly could, like fighting. That's when I was a salmon upstream, fighting to say like, when is the very physical last minute we absolutely have to wait to make the decision? Because if it's going to be a beautiful day on Saturday, we want to be married in the open air. And so sometimes those are the decisions when clients kind of put on us that, again, being a yes person, fire us to fight, for them. But it's also so hard because, again, sometimes you're at the mercy of like time and weather and when to make that right call. That's so hard.
Absolutely. I find what is incredibly challenging is the plan B designing, because the focus of your investment and the focus of your design is always going to be in your plan A. But we tell our clients all the time, you have to, especially in Canada, you have to be just as confident in your plan B. So how do we also design that space and that area to be just as exciting and just as powerful as the plan A? And that to me is always incredibly difficult, because again, you don't want to invest all this time, energy, money into this plan B that may not actually execute. So how do we develop a design within the plan A that we can translate into the plan B and be just as happy with that outcome?
But I think that's our own like type A personality as planners.
Definitely.
And like, and I'm thinking, because I remember Mel Baum and Ashley Piggott, who recently did a takeover, saying something on the same lines as like struggling with the rain plan or the plan B. But like, I have some clients that will say, I am choosing to go ahead with plan A. I realize plan A is risky for weather, and if we have plan B, I'm going to be kind of disappointed. But based on like other, like maybe we're at, at a Muskoka cottage, there's only so much level ground that you can put some chairs for a ceremony. So, and there's only so many covered places. So it's like, if plan A can work, I'm going to take my chances because I will be so freaking happy. But if plan B works, I'm going to be okay knowing it wasn't as good, but I was still happy risking it and making the commitment to go ahead. But I think it's like us being like, oh, it has to be as good,
For sure. And listen, from a client perspective, if they are all have that mentality, I think that's incredible. But, we don't always come by that. And again, it is that planner in me, and that wedding planner specifically, that doesn't want the word disappointed anywhere in and around your wedding. I don't want you to be disappointed if you do have to end up moving to your plan B option. So what do we do? How do we design? How do we conceptualize to make sure we're taking that and moving it into this plan B option that you're just as happy with? But I agree. Every client is going to be different. And
you know what? That's a really good challenge though, because I think you'll probably agree is sometimes I think I get challenged with clients not wanting to really spend a lot of time or investment in a plan B. And this goes a lot to our outdoor weddings. I mean, we're not we're not lucky enough to live in a climate where, you know, our summers are really dry. It's 50-50 rain. And so I think it's really interesting that like I struggle sometimes getting my clients to invest like in a backup tent for ceremony, you know, and I have to say to them, like, you know, they're like, but if we don't need it, I don't want it. And it's like, no problem, but you have to think of it as an insurance policy, you know, you know, and I'm always like, you know, this is plan A for ceremony and plan B. And I often feel like sometimes when I'm simultaneously talking about them, I'm almost disappointing them because I'm bringing like negative juju into it. And I'm like, I'm not trying to in any way foreshadow, but like to your point, it's like, we want to know that like, yeah, if it's plan A, ceremony is here, but if it's plan B, you can't physically put a tent where the ceremony was in plan A. So we need to have a location plan for it, you know?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
This feels like the perfect time to take a break. If you're enjoying this episode, please feel free to hit like. You can also subscribe and tap that notification bell. All right, guys, let's get back into it.
What do you feel are like some of the, you know, most exciting parts of kind of the personalization of weddings? And like I said, kind of at the beginning, I think we can all agree smaller guest counts have allowed us to do so much more and really bring that dinner party vibe that feels more elevated to the table. But what are some ways of a couple's having a large wedding because they have a large family, because it's important to their family, you know, and them as a couple to celebrate in big numbers? What are some ways to still infuse your sense of like personality and taste and, you know, just overall getting people to leave being like, that was so like Kelly and Mark, you know, like those are the things I thrive off of guests saying at a wedding of mine.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think how I do that, I like to really get to know my clients, and you know, from the moment of the first consultation, I want to know how they met. I want to know their first date. I want to know how long they've been together. I want to know what they like to do, social media accounts that they follow, where they gather inspiration from for their wedding. I think those are all important questions to ask to really get to know their style and also themselves as a couple. So if your first date was at a wine bar and you absolutely love wine, maybe you're wine collectors, how do we incorporate that into the wedding day? Is there a sommelier on site talking about the different wine pairing options for your dinners? Are you setting up a wine tasting station? Take that, translate it to scotch. Take that, translate it to cigars. What are things that as a couple you have fallen in love over, and how do you incorporate those things into the day?
Well, I always say people think about your music and think about your playlist. Like I say, you know, whether you're having a band or a DJ, whether you're having 50 guests or 500 guests, like go through the groups of people that are there. Like chances are there's going to be certain music that you're like, my family is going to love to hear a couple of like music songs from this category or this kind of artist or this culture. You know, my partner's family is going to want to hear that. Go to your friend group. Like go back in the days when you and your friends were at your prime, which, you know, and prime in terms of party phase. We're always at our prime. Whatever our stage is, it's our prime. But like, what is it? You know, like, do you have a great group of high school friends or like college, university friends that are coming to the wedding? Like, what's the songs that you guys used to hear? So like, I remember one of our clients, Ellie and Cody, like they had both met down at the University of Wisconsin, and like they loved like the warm pretzels. They like talked about how popular they were down there, and like just like really great like beer festivals and pairings. And so, you know, part of their cocktail hour was like a soft dip, you know, pretzel bar where you could come up and dip it in all your different kind of finishings and toppings and pair it with like different craft beers that they felt was like, you know, for especially for their friends that are coming out from Wisconsin, like would truly really get it. And it would kind of speak to a certain phase in their life. So, you know, does every guest there, you know, get it? Maybe they don't get the personal connection, but as long as a really good enough handful will, like that's who's going to leave with like that impressional moment. And it's like, you know, like I love it, you know, Aldi and Cody walked back down the aisle. Cody the groom was obsessed with the Beach Boys. Hopefully I still hope he is. It's an obsession that should never die. But yeah, you remember like we surprised him and the bride surprised him by coming back down the aisle to a Beach Boys song, and we had beach balls hiding under the guest chairs. And so the guests were like, instead of tossing petals, all these beach balls started throwing, like, you know, being like tossed over the crowd. And it was like his look of surprise. And again, anyone who knows the groom is like, oh my God, this is so fitting for, for Cody, that it's the Beach Boys and we've got like the beach balls being tossed. So it's moments like that that I think capture an identity to who the couple is, because in its essence, a wedding has such a similar format. It's a ceremony. It's generally a mix and mingling time, obviously talking, really pre-COVID. And it's a dinner and then it's a party. So it's like, how do you do that? And I think we've talked before about menu, like how important menu is to just personalize, right?
Yeah. I as you were talking, I thought of my clients, Shay and Nelson at the Four Seasons, and they met at a nightclub. And if you know this couple, they are so much fun, just a really, really great time. And at the end of the night, we had girls come out with sparklers and Moet bottles, and we set up a beautiful like lounge space around the dance floor to mimic a nightclub. And it was just so them. And it's moments like that where the second the girls came out and the dance floor was full, and it was moments like that everybody was like, that's so Shay and that's so Nelson. And that's ultimately the goal. And even, throughout their dinner and going back to menu, we had Tironi peppers brought into the Four Seasons because, they can't eat anything without Tironi peppers on them. And again, if you know the couple, you know that that's something that they love. And so to incorporate moments and small details like that within the wedding, I think is ultimately the goal when we're designing. And that can be big, and it can also translate to small as well, which I think we should talk about, because given the climate and given the world that we're in and this potential summer that we are going into for events, they will be on the smaller scale. So let's talk a little bit about that. What are some ways to infuse those elements into a smaller gathering?
I think, ironically, the family style dinner is a phrase I'm leading towards, but obviously family style service is not something that we would see. But because a lot of couples who have gone ahead with COVID, smaller gathering numbers, and ones that are planning with us for this year are thinking, it could be up to, 25 people at minimum, if we're, where we expect to be, if our government doesn't kind of revise their color zones for outdoor gatherings. So I think because you're going to be surrounded by your, like we use that phrase, nearest and dearest, but literally like your most closest of family. And for some people, not even that many friends, because their closest of family is filling up their capacity. Like what would you serve at a really great family dinner? So think of, whatever your background is, what are your family celebrations? Is it Easter? Is it, Hanukkah? Like, is it Passover? Is it Christmas? Is it Thanksgiving? Is it like a great, July 4th barbecue? Like what brings your family together? And then just elevate it a bit so it feels a bit more formal, to kind of make you feel maybe a bit more kind of, special as a wedding meal, but stick true to those roots, and that's sometimes, things I think I sometimes surprise clients by saying when we're going through menu options, it's like, oh, I hear like, everybody, would really love like, cod, or cod seems to be super popular these days, or a halibut. But like, to be honest, like my family would really just prefer like salmon. Like my family, I'm like, then let's serve salmon. Like, don't serve something because you think it's what you should serve. Serve what people are going to enjoy eating, because that is one of the things they're going to talk about most is what did you serve and how good was the food. So like go straight to their palate. You know what I mean? And don't feel like anything is off guard because it's too informal. There's always ways to make something that's like I've done chicken and waffles as an entree at a very formal wedding. And so again, plating looks different. It's not coming in like a takeout, styrofoam box. It's not coming street style. It's coming formally plated, and it's got more garnishes to dress it up. But I think that's one of the ways really start off with is think about food, think about what brings your family together. Often it is the sharing of meal. And so really kind of like start there, and to really curate that. Secondly, plan your day and your timeline in a way that really gives you meaningful, authentic time with your guests. So, if you have the flexibility to have an earlier ceremony and longer time to, be with those people, do that, plan it in a way that, you can have meaningful conversations with your guests, because with smaller guest counts, you actually have the luxury of looking around the room at a certain point in the evening and know that you've really connected one-on-one with everybody here.
I
You
also
don't have,
want to jump in, just not to interrupt you, but also not only with your guests, but with your significant other.
yeah,
You know, take out, there's no rule book anymore. I'm telling all of my clients, there's no rules anymore. Take out all the old formalities and remind yourself of what the day is meant to be. And so not only spending more time with your guests, but your significant other and that person that you are choosing to spend the rest of your life with, have more time scheduled for moments with just the two of you. You won't always have this opportunity. So
yeah.
take
I
it.
think that's why I push for the first look so often whenever it becomes like a should we or shouldn't we? Like if I know it's an open to discussion, like that's just one of the benefits of it, regardless of even size of wedding. It's like just start your day off with getting to your person sooner and have more meaningful moments throughout the day to kind of capture and cherish and like take it in as opposed to like wait until 5 o'clock to see each other for the first time, you know?
Even if you want to get ready together, again, it goes back to there's no rules. If that's what works for you, do it. You know, enjoy that morning together. And that's not for everybody, and I recognize that. But again, just have fun and do what feels right and plan something that feels authentic to the two of you as a couple and your immediate closest people.
Okay, so I'm going to throw something else out there too. Let me know how you feel about this. I'm also going to say a way to really personalize these more intimate celebrations is give the right people, keyword quotations, right, meaning the right persons and the right number of people, the opportunity to give a speech. Like if we are in a situation where we're anticipating in Ontario, at least being this year, where like dance floors are not going to be opened up again, probably until, next year, 2022. Your meal and the speeches, this is the opportunity for people to sit back, in their seat and take an opportunity to listen in a different way than like they normally would in a loud bustling room where like all of a sudden the tension has to like shush down to come back up to the speaker. And I also think there's a lot of people too that probably will have more heartfelt things to say in the sense of feeling maybe more comfortable in a smaller group environment than maybe would feel, in a room full of 200 people. But I know speeches are like kind of on the fence and some people are really like anti-speeches, but I think this is the way, like have this beautiful meal. If you can't have dancing, like give people the opportunity to have beautiful words. And, some of the best speeches we've heard have come through these small weddings because you have the time. You're not fighting the clock of like, let's get this dance party going. The band's, ready to go. And again, like, if you can make people laugh and then you could make people cry, it's like, those are great moments that again, pull on all of our heartstrings and make your event feel more personal.
So it's interesting, I think, when you talk about the comfort level of the people who are speaking in a more intimate group, because some of the best speeches that we've heard have been in such intimate settings at the rehearsal dinner, at the welcome party, and play off that, and have that be such a big feature of the evening. Because like you said, there isn't this wait for the dance floor to open. There isn't this opportunity for this big party afterwards. So really focus on those speeches and those intimate moments and how to bring them into your elevated dinner party.
Yeah. And like I said, late night too, like that's one of the things I'm always saying to my clients. It's like, what's your go-to late night? Are you sweet? Are you savory? Like if you're savory, what is it? Like, then let's have that, or let's personalize it more. Like when we brought like Chick-fil-A in at Kristen and Dom's wedding. Yeah, custom branded for the client. It's like people went nuts for them, but they were like, oh my God, this is like so them. Or we brought like a bubble tea company in to do like fresh bubble teas, and everyone was like, oh my gosh. So those are like the personalized moments that I think really when you bring who you are into it. And I always think too, like I tell my clients, like, don't get so caught up and so detached from the experience. Like always imagine if you were a guest at your own wedding, what would you want to experience? Because I think sometimes we get detached as like the host in a way that makes us feel disconnected from thinking about the experience. So, it's kind of bringing it back to that.
And you also have a sense of guest expectation and I find a lot of my clients will take the approach of, well, this is what people are going to expect. They're going to expect, a dessert course. And it's like, well, yeah, they may, because that's all they've ever experienced. Let's take them outside of the box, like give them something they haven't experienced before, make them walk away and say, wow, that was so different. And that was something I haven't experienced before at a wedding. And they might like it, they might not, but at the end of the day, at least you know that you are going and doing what feels authentic to you as a couple.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think you also said something really great too, with like the rehearsal dinner and kind of welcome parties and those kind of things. Often we've seen those events happen for like bigger weddings or when there's a lot of out of town guests. But something that we've suggested to some of our clients too is, if you are restricted to a smaller guest count wedding, think about just elongating your wedding weekend with like maybe 3 days of events, but like 3 slightly different guest counts. Let's just say you're restricted to 25, 50 people. Would you want to do a great, welcome party turned into a like last night celebration, with like the singles, with like your friends who can't show up to the wedding based on capacity? Do you want to do like a great join us for brunch with the newlyweds the day after? So again, you can have people who weren't able to make your immediate group on the wedding day show up too. So I think there's also ways as well to use the piggybacking of like the wedding day and what are those traditional other events and how can you spin them to include different people in them, And I mean, listen, we've talked about waves, we've gone through different options with venues too. Can we do waves of guests,
Different,
married.
which
Yeah.
by waves, you mean different time slots for guests to arrive throughout the day.
Yeah. Yeah. Like we've talked about doing like a luncheon, and then going, into ceremony and then having said group leave and other group stays on for dinner. Or maybe one group comes for ceremony and you do a luncheon and then go to a dinner. Like those are all different ways we've talked about, how to give guests the opportunity. But I love the idea of multi-daying it and just kind of saying,
Me
join
too.
us for brunch with the newlyweds.
Again, like I feel like the slogan of this podcast is throw out the rule book. There are no rules anymore.
Yeah.
This is your opportunity and you might not always have it. I have a lot of clients and couples who say, we really wanted to do this something small anyways. And, COVID has allowed us to do that. And, how many clients have you had say that? I've had a handful, and it's like, you should be doing that anyways, but now it's your opportunity. You don't have to have the guilt of, not inviting people that you may not have wanted to invite in the first place. And so now's the time to play and to have fun and to be authentic and to go back to the idea of doing what is best for the two of you.
Totally. Yeah, no, I totally agree. What do you think? Are there any other like really risky like wedding concepts that you've pulled off or things that you're like, I don't know how this is going to go? Like even just time wise or location, install?
I had at the Four Seasons that 30-foot floral wall, and most floral walls that you see are actually faux, or they incorporate artificial floral. And this couple was very specific and adamant on all the floral being real. So after the ceremony, we ended up flipping the area to be their backdrop to the head table. And so it was in a position where a lot of people throughout the night would be able to go up to it, to feel it, to see it, and to be close to it. And so it was so important for them to have all completely real floral. And again, going back to timing, logistics, setup, we were like, how are we going to do this? The wall had to be set up in advance. So we were like, how are the flowers going to stay real? How are they going to look fresh? Like for, potentially over 24 hours, what are we going to do? And so I worked with the incredible stems team, and we basically created a live floral wall, and it had all the floral were in their own sort of individual water pockets. And the water, so if you were close to the wall, you could actually hear the water dripping down. And they created this trellis to catch all the water at the bottom of the wall. It sounded like a waterfall. It was beautiful. But to create something like this was, more of a challenge to them. Again, like, here's me presenting this crazy idea and saying, we have to set it up a day in advance, and is it going to work, and is it going to last? And so that's one of the things I love about our industry and working with incredible designers and incredible vendors, because we can sometimes approach them with these crazy out of the box ideas, and it's fun to work with them to figure out, how are we going to execute this and how are we going to make this work? And so it was beautiful. It was all fresh.
It was gorgeous. It was gorgeous. I was lucky enough to be there that day, assisting and helping out. As your kind of second, and it was honestly stunning. And you're right. It was a big tackle to take it on, but those are the things that are really worth it. That are sometimes really important to clients. That, again, being planners, I think we're yes people, right? So, and I'm laughing because I'm thinking about challenges, and I don't know how we haven't talked about Niagara on the Lake.
Oh my God.
I will leave certain names out of this one because it was absolutely I think this is literally when people say force majeure, act of God, before we started using the force majeure phase as much as we do now in the pandemic. This was force majeure. I think what happened was we were setting up a tent well in advance of a wedding date, and the property had turned off their industrial sprinkler system the day of install. And it never came on until somehow the night before the wedding at 4 a.m, just shooting absolute industrial size streams of water into our tent that, again, from a planning perspective, we had the luxury of setting up days in advance. So day of the wedding, there's a few more fresh florals to bring in and tables to set, but linens were on, floor plans were done. Some of the major
we refer to it as the Bellagio fountains. This water was like nothing you've ever seen before.
So to show up to at 8 a.m, Ellie and I, and looking at this tent where it's completely it was just parts of the tent had probably a couple of inches of water. And it just happened that we had some of the side walls closed, but not enough of them because, again, it wasn't supposed to rain overnight. And the band, oh my goodness. I just remember we were working with Soul Power and they were there too. Everyone just kind of just ambushed the tent first thing in the morning. We got the call and lifting up the DJ console and water just dripping through. And I mean, this is probably, again, one of the things I love about our industry is when I don't know, can you say it, when shit crap hits the fan, everybody jumps in. There was not a person who was on that site that day. Didn't matter if you were with the facility, the venue, if you were, somebody within the events team, if you were just dropping off another crate of cutlery because it was the last look, everybody was hands on deck, squeegeeing this floor, trying to get the water out, bringing tables out into the sun, trying to get them to dry off. It was just, and I mean, again, fast forward to the day after the wedding, at the brunch, chatting with the bride and groom after going,
they had no idea.
So did
they
anything
showed
go
up
wrong?
We're is
yesterday?
Now the time to tell them? This feels like a good time. But they showed up to that day and they had no idea that anything had even occurred that morning. And it was a huge sigh of relief for us that we were able to make it happen. And again, like you said, everybody jumped on board. There was no, well, I'm the florist and this isn't my role. Well, I'm part of the band and, I'm not going to mop the floor. No. It was all hands on deck, and it was,
Soul Power was amazing. We were there with Eventure and Rachel Klingen's team, and they were amazing. And the venue was amazing. They put a fielder out to all of their wineries and called every person in to go to every hardwood store, buy every squeegee you could. And it was when the bride and groom showed up, and it was an earlier day wedding. It was starting at about, 2:00 with the bride and groom on site. No one had, any of the slightest, faintest clue that it had happened.
We jinxed ourselves though, because that morning we were having breakfast at the hotel and we were sitting across from each other, and we had done all the setup in advance. as Laura mentioned, and we were across from each other. And we said, it feels so calm for a wedding day. And we're like, yeah, it's because, we took care of all the setup in advance. We're ready to go. And then 2 seconds later, the phone rang. Yeah. And here we are, pedal to the metal, driving over to the tent as we see the Bellagio fountains going off. And anyways, that is I think we need a podcast in a day to talk about all of the crazy stories like this, all the wedding day mishaps, and not to scare any clients, but hey, kids, hire a wedding planner, because you'll show up to your wedding day and not know that this had happened.
But those are the weddings that are the craziest, that literally make you feel like those scenarios that you've lost a year of your life, but in a sick and twisted way. Like, we thrive off of that.
We really do.
You go home being like, you made such a difference in the world today. Like, I feel like that when things are like literally like falling to pieces and there's a crisis and we can jump in and be part of the solution. It's like, you feel on top of the world. Because for so many of our couples, and I say so many because some have had multiple celebrations planned, for specific reasons, but for most of our couples, like, it's one day. It's one day for them to get it right. It's like a heck of a lot of planning leading up to it. So it's like when something unexpected happens, like, you just like adrenaline takes over and we're like, go.
We're not wishing that upon anybody, but we are the problem solvers, and we absolutely do thrive off of that. And I think that's part of the reason why this year has been so incredibly challenging, which we've touched on in other discussions that we've had, but this concept of being the go-to for the solutions and the go-to person for the plans, and we can't do that right now. And I think it's really part of the reason we're feeling so restricted and off. Because of that, and not being able to have the answers for our clients, and not being able to be the problem solvers in this climate.
Okay, so on that note, I have one last question for you that kind of brings us back to like intimacy and personalization. And this is something I'm having a lot of conversation with my clients on. I know you are, Bay, Tyra, is the idea of live stream. And has live stream had its day last year, or has it not? And so I'm going to give my 2 cents on it. And the one thing I love about you and I is sometimes we disagree, but it's like so normal for us. And we're like, it just makes us work. Like, it's like we're constantly sometimes the yin together, we're constantly the yang, and sometimes we're the yin and yang, and it's like good to have that balance. But I feel that this is one of those ways to personalize your wedding if you have to significantly cut your guest list, is just consider offering people the opportunity to watch live on a live stream. And I'm over the same day edits, like, I'm not as like, ooh, you had a drone, that's so great. I love videography, and I think it is 100% worth every cent you could pay. And like photography, I think it's something that grows in value over time.
I agree.
So I always say have a videographer, but like, I'm not about, like this multiple videos and slideshows shown at a wedding. But I think if you have to, scale down your guest list a lot, I do like having talked to people who were invited to join in by live stream. It just meant so much to them that the couple made the arrangements to allow them to feel included in the most important part of the day, which is a ceremony. Like, you only need to live stream your ceremony. Please do not take it into like reception and speeches. But just for that, like, again, it's less than an hour every ceremony from start to finish. I think that's a way to really personalize if you have to leave people out. And I think everybody I've talked to has said how much they appreciated from the comfort of their own home, feeling not left out. Like their amount of FOMO was like taken down a lot because you opened up that window into that part of the day. What do you think?
I actually agree with you on this one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. As much as I have struggled with Zoom and things digitally, and the way that this year has highlighted the digital world, it's not totally my jam. I'm still very much an in-person person, and I thrive off of that environment. I do agree with you, because if we are still in this climate and you have people in your life that are important to you and that have been a big part of your relationship that are not able to physically be at your wedding, if you can include them some way, somehow, I'm all for it. And so I do agree with you.
Yeah.
Contrary to what you might have thought my answer.
Yeah. I was like, she's going to say no on this one. But I mean, and even what sparked it too was like one of our elopement edit clients for this year, they want to do their live stream on Zoom because they're like, we want our guests to feel like they can get dressed up if they want to see each other and to feel socially connected. And I was like, a lot, live streams on YouTube and such, but I was like, that's a great idea. And again, like just thinking about it and talking to a few people who have been involved only from a live stream, they've just said like how much they appreciate not feeling like they were either like in that small group and totally disconnected from it, is like just feeling they had a window into that ceremony means so much.
And here I'm going to throw out another way to make it even more personal is send those guests a beautiful paper invitation with your Zoom link or whatever it may be the way for them to log on, and send them a beautiful box of some sort. Like those have been really big for us this year. And a mini bottle of wine or champagne or something to make them feel like part of the day and part of the experience.
So one of our clients, what we're doing similar to that concept, but again, working with a lower budget, which something that feels a bit more comfortable, is we're sending like microwave popcorn. But again, we're zhuzhing it. Like it's coming, the microwave popcorn packets are going to come in like a beautiful sleeve. You know what I mean? And so again, it's like, pop some popcorn and join us, sit back and relax and join us for our ceremony. And I'm like, I just love that. And that's a way to make people who feel excluded feel so special and included in that part of your day.
I love it.
Yeah. God, who would have thought we've been thriving off of microwave popcorn? Cheers.
Send me microwave popcorn any day.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for chatting for another great round. Happy Wednesday to everyone else who has joined us this morning. And again, thank you so much to Corinne McDonald Films, who has passed over the mic so generously to Ellie and I to do the May Takeover, to chat all things wedding industry, obviously with a touch of COVID because we cannot let it be the elephant in the room. But we do need to kind of also see beyond that, because there are so many great things that we're trying to do for couples, this year and beyond, that need to just pivot and keep moving forward.
Beautifully said. Thank you, awesome. Laura, as always, for joining me. And we'll see you next time.
Yeah, let's do it again next week. Same time, same place. Bye, everyone.
Bye.